Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us in the world as one.
In essence, to me, all of the marvels of science and technology, all of the electronics and mechanical wonders, are just so many millions of tons of junk, unless it enhances the lives of men. The reason we emphasize machines and technology is to free men and to find the meaning of their own existence and lives. We've got to get away from this limited, I did this and I did that, and the self-centeredness that dominates our society today. It must be a privilege to serve members of society. Not that we want rewards or medals or honor for what we do, because it is just an honor to do it. Americans have been conditioned in their kind of society to get a different kind of car next year, to buy a new television set or a tape recorder. We are radical as hell, but our political and social institutions have not changed. And this is where we are stagnating, because we always equate any new idea with communism or regimentation, because we've been brought up to fear that which is new. We've got to reorganize our way of thinking and reconsider our social aims. The entire money-structured and materialistic-oriented society is a false society. What kind of competition is there in your body? Suppose your brain said, I'm the most important organ, and the liver said, I am, and I want to go a free enterprise system. You'd rot away in a month if every organ of your body went out for itself. Your whole banking system is utterly corrupt. Your lending institutions have loused up the system, but there's nobody out there telling you what's wrong with it. So it looks okay to you. I'm not afraid of anybody. I don't work for anyone. I am afraid to live in the society we live in today. Our society cannot be maintained by this type of incompetency. It was great, the free enterprise system, about 35 years ago. That was the last of its usefulness. We have the brains, the know-how, the technology, and the feasibility to build an entirely new civilization.
Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us in the world as one.
How's everybody doing? Good. Welcome to the second annual Zeitgeist Day. I suppose this is really the first annual Zeitgeist Day. Actually, this first Zeitgeist Day as of last year really wasn't, it didn't have as much of a point as this. I've made some interesting discoveries, as you've seen probably in Zeitgeist Addendum. I assume most of you. Oh, by the way, my name is Peter. I don't want to bore you all with any long-winded introductions because there's so much I want to cover tonight. We have a 4-hour program, essentially. It's going to be a lot of information, and I want to take a nice pace with it. But we have about 450 events happening worldwide tonight, which is amazing in 70 countries. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted and inspired by the inspiration I understand in science. There's at least 10 countries represented that have come here just for this event, and I hope to make it worth their while. So let's begin. Here's what we're going to do tonight. First, I'm going to present an orientation of the movement's tenets and goals. Then there will be a conversation between Jacques, Roxanne, and I, where we will discuss how the ideas of the resource-based economy, the Venus Project, have come about, along with some of the most commonly asked questions. Then we will have a nice long Q&A with all of you, which is a very important part of this. Hopefully an hour and a half of that. That's my goal, and hopefully I can get through this material. And before I begin, please note that the sources cited in this particular presentation I'm about to present are in the Activist Orientation Guide, which I hopefully many of you have seen or downloaded from ZeitgeistMovement.com. But they can be found there. I didn't have time to cite everything in the presentation, so please reference that if you're interested in seeing where everything comes from. This is basically derived from that. What is the Zeitgeist Movement? The Zeitgeist Movement is the activist arm of the Venus Project, which constitutes the lifelong work of industrial designer and social engineer Jacques Fresco, who's in the audience today. Please give him a warm welcome. Who's been working with Jacques for 30 years. He's also simply put, the Venus Project represents what the Zeitgeist Movement hence condones, which could be summarized as the application of the scientific method to social concern. It's interesting how we've been living on this planet for a long time, and it's just now, just past maybe 200 years, we've actually begun to consider the importance of science. It's difficult to deny that one of the greatest discoveries we've made, which has allowed the most tremendous advancement of our abilities on this planet, has been the understanding and application of science. It seems obvious to most of us, but if you look closely, you see that most people do not think with this particular attitude. We want to begin a deliberate delegation of social, technical processes and decision-making to the scientific method and technology. More elaboration on that as we continue, because I think a statement like that raises a lot of hairs on the back of the neck. Once we realize that our fundamental problems in life are really technical, we can then induce a near empirical train of thought that can orient us in the correct direction for true progress. Part 1, monetary economics. In this section, we're going to address the mechanisms of our world monetary system, pointing out the consequences this type of organizational structure has produced. These consequences include, 1, the need for cyclical consumption, denoting the economic requirement that products and services are perpetually bought and sold, regardless of quality and waste. 2, the perpetuation of scarcity, noting how resources, goods, and services are deliberately made scarce to ensure profitability within the supply and demand equation. 3, the priority of profit, denoting the vast corruption commonplace in the world today due to the need to generate income. 4, fiscal manipulation, noting how the central banking systems of the world work to control the economy for the benefit of their corporate constituents and establishment power. Then, in the next section, which is what I call the final failure, we're going to denote the absurd financial practices that have caused our current economic crisis, which most of you probably, actually I consider this audience to be more intelligent and more aware than most out there, but most of the public has no idea what's actually going on in the economy and why things are happening the way they are. In turn, we'll be addressing a phenomenon that no one talks about, which actually transcends a great amount of issues in this beyond responsibility, I like to call it, mentality that has made this production, and that is what I call the ultimate outsource, which is the rapidly growing phenomenon of automation replacing human labor. And this is a powerful thing that needs a lot of attention in our world. This is when you're going to find this to be a major emphasis of this project and this presentation. Very quickly, economics is defined as the social science that studies the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Monetary economics, therefore, is thus the use of currency
as a means for facilitating the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Monetary economics is fundamentally based on selling one's labor as a commodity in the open market. Keep that in mind. Mechanism 1, the need for cyclical consumption. The roles of people in a monetary system are basically broken into three distinctions. You have the employee, the employer, and the consumer. The employee performs tasks for the employer in exchange for a wage or monetary payment, while the employer sells a good or service to the consumer for a profit, another classification of monetary payment. In turn, both the employer and the employee function as consumers for the monetary payments, wages, and profits they obtain are used to purchase goods and services relevant to their survival. The act of purchasing goods and services is what allows the entire economic system to perpetuate, thus allowing for the employer, the employee, to make money and continue consuming, of course. In other words, it's the requirement of perpetual or cyclical consumption that keeps the entire economy going. If consumption was ever to stop, the whole system would collapse. Keep that in mind. So what are the results of this cyclical consumption? Well, nothing physically produced can ever maintain a lifespan longer than what can be endured in order to maintain the needed turnover. In other words, everything produced must break down in a respective amount of time in order for the financial circulation needed to continue and power the economy. This comes in the form of planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is essentially the deliberate withholding of efficiency so the product in question breaks down respectively fast. I would say planned obsolescence comes in two basic forms. The first is intentional, with manufacturers actually timing their products for breakdown or obsolescence. I find that Apple Computer is a great example of strategic planned obsolescence in action. I mean, if you examine their marketing tactics, you'll find that every product they have has at least 3 to 5 stages of release, the first always being obsolete within 3 months. If you examine the history of the iPod, for example, you see this in action. It's actually amazing. When the marketing department of Apple stages a release of any new product, they are thinking many generations ahead. The goal of you basically buying the same thing over and over again. The second is indirect. This is where profit-based shortcuts taken in production, usually in the form of cheap materials or poor design, translates into an inferior product immediately, with the failure of a product simply a matter of time. This is basically every company in existence, for every company has to save money in its production, therefore it uses cheap materials. A company simply cannot afford to make the best products with the best materials because the system doesn't allow it. The second consequence is that new products and services must be constantly introduced regardless of functional utility. Have you ever stopped to look around at how much wasteful garbage there is out there that's being mass-produced for the sake of you to buy it? If you look closely, you'll find that 80 to 90% of the products out there have no legitimate basis whatsoever and exist entirely for the purpose of cyclical consumption and thus profit. The result of this need for cyclical consumption are nothing but unacceptable. For not only are resources being neglectfully used in products that are designed not to last, wasting human energy and materials, the amount of frivolous waste and pollution is staggering. In other words, waste is a deliberate byproduct that industries need to perpetuate cyclical consumption. The obsolete or expired product is trashed, often to landfills, polluting the environment, while the constant multiplicity wastes resources and accelerates the pollution. So this begs the question, what if industry actually made things to last? What would happen? The whole economy would collapse. It's not a joke either. Mechanism 2, the abundance of scarcity. In monetary economics, supply and demand is partly how goods and services attain value. The more there is of something, the less it is worth in respect to itself. As an interesting example, in the 17th century, tulips were brought from Turkey to Holland Certain strains were so rare and scarce that crowd madness took hold and a ridiculous bubble occurred in the tulip market. This particular tulip evidently went for about $600,000 US, something that had no intrinsic value. Really, it deteriorated. You couldn't keep it. It's a very interesting testimony to the power of psychology, among other things. In other words, scarcity equals profit. If a company can convince the public that their product is rare, the more they can charge for that product. This provides a strong motivation to keep items and resources scarce. If a company knows that they can make more money by having their items scarce, the propensity to deliberately limit production or be dishonest about available resources is very high. A recent example of this is the supposed supply crunch triggered speculative bubble in oil in 2007 and 2008. You know, all it takes for something like this is an announced problem with the oil supply in the media to create public concern, along with a few hedge fund friends working in collusion with the oil insiders to start the initial price increase. And then the greedy public will just follow the trend, jump in, and fuel the bubble. If you think these things don't happen, think again. False scarcity is constant in this system, for it is rewarded and easy to manipulate. The corporations own the resources that they're putting their stats out on. The bottom line is that the monetary system's reward mechanism is inherently discouraged abundance. In fact, in this system, profit can actually be made as a result of scarcity generated by environmental pollution, such as what is now happening with our water supplies. This creates a perverse reinforcement of indifference to environmental concern by industry. For the more damage there is, the more profit that can be obtained by offering solutions. If I had more time, I would go into other elements of this regard, such as the medical establishment in America, which does nothing less than deliberately thrive off the sickness of the population. And this leads us to mechanism 3, the priority of profit. A monetary system's foremost motivating principle is profit, or more generally, income. All people must seek out a strategy to acquire money. A wage earner seeks out the best possible pay he can get for his services, while the employer seeks to constantly reduce costs in order to maximize their profit. This competitive mentality extends into all facets of society. To a large degree, the world you see around you full of corruption, inequality, and distortion is really a result of this pursuit. To put the spectrum of profit corruption into a general orientation, we're going to use 3 classifications: general crime, corporate crime, and government crime. General crime in the monetary system ranges from petty theft to illegal sales to fraud to violent robbery. This byproduct of the system is often not given the thought needed to understand its actual source. For many tend to dismiss these so-called criminals as some kind of social anomaly. The reality is that the stress, conflict, poverty, and deprivation generated by the monetary system's inherent structure is the foundational cause. In the 1990s, there was a study called the Merva-Fowles study, which analyzed the relationship between unemployment and crime. They based their research on 30 major metropolitan areas with a total population of, I believe, 80 million. They found that a 1% increase in unemployment generated a 6.7% increase in homicides, a 3.4% increase in violent crimes, and a 2.4% increase in property crime. During the period from 1990 to 1992, this translated into 1,459 additional homicides, 62,000 additional violent crimes, and 222,000 additional property crimes. This is extremely revealing. A person living in a deprived environment with little resources, poor education, and few opportunities for work will do what they need to in order to live. While the stress of the situation often leads to violent, offensive acts, the old images of Wall Street in 1929 with men jumping out the windows, or these stories you hear about now of people killing the whole family because they got fired from their job. Not only do they not have the money to live, the psychological element is powerful because they don't have that job role, which is supposed to have their worth that they've been conditioned into, that they're judged by their job. So if they're belittled if they don't have a job, they're unemployed. And that's a very serious psychological problem we have in the system. Corporate crime. Corporate crime, which is almost exclusively profit-related, takes many forms. Planned obsolescence, monopolistic collusion, market manipulation, outsourcing, price fixing, labor exploitation, and government collusion are just a few. Now, from Enron's deliberate shutting down of California's power plants to boost its energy stocks, to the Bayer Corporation's knowing distribution of HIV-tainted drugs, it should be clear to most people that corporate crime is constant and oftentimes more insidious than general crime, where the repercussions tend to affect large groups of people. It's important to consider the psychology of this. The corporate criminal's need to secure profitability is no different in basis than the general criminal's need to survive. While the latter typically commits crimes to live, the former commits crimes to further secure their positions of power, lifestyle, and wealth. They are both basically based on fear. The notion of greed, apart from being based on fear, also manifests in the form of neuroses, which is very much like a gambling addiction. Since the more you have, the more you can get in our society, the fear of never having enough is created. Not to mention industry advertising's job to make you feel like you always want more, so they can perpetuate the cyclical consumption. Then there's government crime. Government crime is one of the more complex and difficult forms to consider, for perceptions of government are highly modified by the traditional values of the society due to the influence. For example, patriotism is often used to encourage support for war. You know, you for the war and support the troops. I love the old Bill Hicks line, I'm for the war but against the troops. Patriotism is often used, and it makes people feel like they have an obligation to agree with a government's decision. That being said, let's take an objective look at what government actually is within a monetary system. The central role of government is basically the invention of regulatory legislation and policies to handle the functioning of society. Idealistically, the broad interests of the public would be the first priority of government, right? Well, government, as we know it, is actually a parent corporation, businesses working within the government's economy. While it might have a general interest in the welfare and economic state of the nation overall, its real interest is in companies that benefit it directly. I think we are all aware of the constant prostitution that exists with our so-called leaders. Lobbying and campaign contributions in America alone constitute billions of dollars a year. And make no mistake, this money is given entirely under the pretense of putting the donating party's agenda into action. Now, while the examples of government and corporate collusion are vast, the greatest monetarily derived crime of government is its use of war for the benefit of its corporate and financial constituents. In the words of two-time Congressional Medal of Honor recipient Major General Smedley D. Butler, wars are racket. They always have been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most efficient. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and losses in lives. Accelerated industrial creation, military contracts, reconstruction contracts, energy resource acquisition or theft, high-interest, austerity-driven World Bank and private bank loans for post-war economies are just a few of the highly profitable mediums utilized. War is big business. The true motivation for war today is actually threefold. One, industrial profit maximized for the elite. Two, resource acquisition or theft, as was the case with Iraq and Afghanistan. And three, strategic geopolitical alignment to increase the ease of further industrial profit, resource theft, and political and corporate influence. War is possibly the greatest sickness caused by the desire for wealth and maintenance of power. Government, with its team of brainwashed assassins on hand, is involved in the ultimate form of self-preservation, And as long as all the resources of the world remain hoarded and restricted to the material benefit of the few, this pattern of war will never end. Now, while these generalized classifications of corruption are important to recognize, it really comes down to understanding that most all strategic monetary gain is inherently dishonest and hence corrupt. Insecurity, competition, greed. This is what really powers our economic system at its core, psychologically. And we will never see true decency or ethics, whatever that may be, as long as these characteristics manifest. In a society at war with itself for survival, so-called ethics is simply unaffordable. Mechanism 4, fiscal manipulation. Currency today is fiat, which means its value comes essentially from government decree. In other words, there is nothing physically backing up the value of any currency. Generally speaking, monetary value in the fiat system is actually derived from how much money is in circulation within an economy. While manipulative factors are in play, such as floating currencies traded in the open market, the value of fiat currency today is basically based on supply and demand, just like its normal product counterpart. The more money that is in circulation, the less each unit of fiat currency is worth. When less money is in circulation, it makes each unit worth more, respectively. A quick glance at the value of the US dollar versus the money supply historically shows this definitively. This phenomenon is called inflation and deflation, as I'm sure most of you know. It's a general distinction. Economists love to debate these issues. It's funny how in economics, virtually nothing is static. You can get into a semantic debate with just about anything. I get emails from PhDs in economics that have never even heard of the fractional reserve system. It's amazing to me. Inflation and deflation, where prices tend to rise when more money is in circulation, fall when less money is in circulation. Generally speaking, the expansion period is usually associated with so-called economic growth. For the more money that's available, they will be put to use, the more jobs that are created. Conversely, the contraction period, which is also called a slump or recession or depression, the money is drying up and hence there is less money to put to use, so jobs are lost and companies fail. Economic growth is typically defined as the increase in the amount of goods and services produced by an economy over time. GDP is often used to measure this. That's what you typically hear about on the news. To understand economic growth more thoroughly, let's say I counterfeit 100 million US dollars. Actually, 1 million is maybe rational. And I give it to you, and you buy and fix up an old building, hire a team of employees, and start to produce a product that the company buys. This would be considered an expansion of the economy. You have invested in real estate, increased the unemployment rate, and created new products that others buy, therefore exciting the circulation of currency and cyclical consumption. Now, what if it was found out by the authorities that all the money you had was in fact counterfeit, and the whole operation was shut down? This would be a contraction of the money supply. A contraction of the economy and the money supply. For the money thus vanishes, your employees would be laid off, building foreclosed upon, and production halted. Given this scenario, one should ask, what was the real growth? If the increase or expansion in the supply of money can result in the creation of jobs and production, while the decrease or contraction result in the loss of jobs and production, what's the point? In classic economics, you often hear about this thing called the business cycle. All the business cycle really is the materialized expansions and contractions of the money supply. The regulation, or more specifically the manipulation of the business cycle, is the job of the central bank of a country. This is where interest rates come in. Obviously, as most of us know, an interest rate is a fee charged to a borrower for the use of credit. Now, without having to get into too much detail, the central bank of the country basically dictates what the commercial banks charge in interest for the public to take loans upon. You hear this, the Fed has a prime rate and a discount rate and things like that. When the Fed lowers its dominant interest rates, so do the commercial banks. And credit becomes less expensive and borrowing tends to increase. When the Fed raises its interest rates, credit becomes more expensive and borrowing tends to decrease. In addition, let's remember, all money is created out of debt through loans. And for those that saw Zeitgeist Addendum, I hope you're very clear on that. Every dollar in your wallet is owed back to the banks, one way or another, with interest attached most likely somewhere down the line. This denoted, the rate by which money is created depends on how much someone is willing to pay in interest to acquire the initial loan. And the central bank, with its power to regulate interest rates, therefore has the power to regulate the money supply and, to a large degree, the growth and contraction periods of the business cycle. Now, why does the central bank need to control this? Because of debt and inflation. If the money supply was allowed to constantly increase or expand, it is simply a matter of time before the market becomes saturated with excess liquidity, stifling the resulting economic growth. This will lead to inflation, depreciating the value of the currency, raising prices. Very quickly on this point, here is a $100 trillion note produced by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe in 2008. And here's what a $100 billion note could buy the moment it came out. By the way, Zimbabwe did this because of its extensive debt to the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, which I'm sure most of you know is one of the greatest financial con jobs the Western banking aristocracy has ever come up with. Another example is after World War II and the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forced to pay financial reparations for its damage, so they simply started printing more money to do it. And hyperinflation quickly took hold. In this picture here, a woman is being shown burning her German marks for heat because they were that worthless. However, more importantly is the issue of debt. The more an economy expands, the greater the debt that is created. This sets up an inevitable systemic crisis. And the money needed to pay the interest charged on the loans does not exist in the economy outright. Therefore, there is always more outstanding debt than money in circulation. And once the debt grows larger than a person or a company can afford, defaults begin, often in a systemic way. Loans slow and or stop, and the money supply begins to contract. This particular scenario of debt overpowering and nullifying expansion could be simply termed financial failure. And this leads us to the next section. The final failure, beyond irresponsibility. The collective external debt of all the governments in the world is now about $52 trillion according to the CIA's World Factor. And I think that number is actually quite low based on the data that I saw. The United States alone has about $12 trillion of this debt as of January 2009. In a study authorized by the U.S. Treasury in 2001, it was found that in order to keep paying interest on this debt at its current rate of growth, the U.S., by 2013, income taxes would need to be raised to 65% more than So, the entire planet is in debt to itself. And am I the only one that sees a big problem with this? I mean, the colossal absurdity of the work. How can the whole world owe money to itself? I mean, the world is basically bankrupt. I haven't even mentioned the $1.5 quadrillion in outstanding derivatives that currently are floating around the U.S. economy, which is about 10 to 20 times the gross domestic product of the whole planet. If you don't see the ridiculousness of our system on this level, it's incredible. It's the negligence and greed and absurdity, compounded, leveraged to the hilt. It's unbelievable. So look, the monetary system is nothing more than a game. Those in positions of financial power alter the rules of the game at will. The nature of those rules are guided by the same competitive, distorted mentalities that are used to compete in everyday monetary life. Only this time the game is rigged at its root to favor those who run the show. For example, if I have $1 million, or actually if you have $1 million, and you put it into a CD at 5% interest, you will generate 50 grand a year just because of that deposit. You're making money off of money itself. No invention, no contribution to society, know nothing. That being denoted, if you are a lower to middle class person who is limited in funds and wants to use credit cards or get interest-based loans to buy their home, then you are paying interest to the bank, which the bank is then turning around and using, in theory, to pay the person's return with a 5% CD. What the bank is basically doing is stealing from the working poor to pay the leisurely rich. Simply put, the social stratification you see in the world today is maintained and guaranteed by the monetary system's underlying mechanisms. That reality aside, let's return to the subject of the so-called business cycle. As mentioned before, when money is added to the money supply, money is then typically put to use for some reason. Often these reasons include starting a business, buying a home, investing in the stock market, etc. The application of this money often translates into so-called economic growth and the boom period of the business cycle. Unfortunately, money cannot be added into the economy indefinitely, for the debt and inflation caused by the expansion will eventually overcome the growth benefits. This is due to the reality that new money is always needed to help cover the outstanding debt, largely due to the need to pay back the interest on the loans, which does not respectfully exist in the money supply. If you're not aware of that, that was another point in the Zeitgeist Movement. Money is loaned out at interest. They only have the principal in the money supply. All the interest does not exist. It's not there. When problems begin to arise after periods of monetary expansion, such as rising debt levels, slowing people's desire to take on new loans, central bank and government regulators basically have two choices. They can either, one, continue the expansion as best they can by infusing even more money, often by lowering the interest rates, making credit cheaper, or two, they can let the contraction, hence recession, run its course, raise the interest rates, and try to shake out the economy and bring it back to some form of equilibrium. As far as history is concerned, the pattern has been for them to do both, leaning mostly on number one. Basically, the idea is to ease the recession by increasing liquidity. The reasoning is simple. It is politically unpopular for the ruling class to have unemployed, poor citizens. This can lead to contempt for the leadership and instability. Therefore, there is always the attempted game of placating the public with false security in order to avoid the truth coming out about the inherent problems of the monetary system itself. The result of this easing of the contraction really just delays the inevitable. And since the U.S. government has eased virtually every contraction period since the Great Depression by infusing more money into the system, just like you're seeing now, a doomsday scenario awaits. The big contraction. And it might be starting right now. Again, money cannot be added to the money supply indefinitely. The debt inflation caused by the expansion will eventually overcome the growth benefits. And this is likely now happening on a massive scale, and based on the numbers, no intervention or bailout to ease the pending crisis is likely to work. Why? Mainly because the debt levels are far too high. The total debt of the U.S. government plus its citizens was about $53 trillion in 2007. This is simply absurd. The total U.S. money supply, M3, was only about $12 trillion in 2007, while the annual GDP of the U.S. was only about $14 trillion. There is very little the U.S. government can do to stop this large debt-generating contraction. Even with the insertion of tens of trillions of dollars, they cannot compensate for the imbalance. Plus, if they did this type of liquidity injection, the result would no doubt be hyperinflation, adding to the stagflation we are seeing now, where inflation and economic stagnation, such as increasing unemployment, occur simultaneously. So then, what's the resolution? In response to these problems, very often people suggest monetary reform. The suggestions pretty much consist of, going back to the gold standard, outlawing interest, which of course is a good idea in theory, shutting down the Federal Reserve and giving power of printing money back to the government, and all of that. And while these reforms pose some merit, even though extremely limited in light of the holistic lack of integrity, the very foundation of the monetary system, there is still an issue missing from the entire equation, which in fact overrides the monetary system's entire relevance, and no monetary reform can ever resolve this issue, and that is technological unemployment. As John Maynard Keynes, one of the fathers of modern economics, stated in the general theory of unemployment, interest, and money, we are being afflicted with a new disease of which some readers may not have yet heard the name, but of which we'll hear a great deal in the years to come, namely technological unemployment. This means unemployment due to our discovery of means of economizing the use of labor, outrunning the pace by which we can find new uses for labor. While politicians, business leaders, and labor leaders bicker over issues they claim are responsible for the growing unemployment in the world, such as foreign outsourcing or immigrant labor, the real long-term cause is going unaddressed in the public debate, and that is technological unemployment. At the core of the monetary system itself is the mechanism of labor or income. Our entire economic system is based on human beings selling their labor as a commodity in the open market. If humans do not have the option to work for a living, then the monetary system as we know it is over. No one can buy goods if they don't earn money. Companies cannot afford to produce if the consumer has no purchasing power. Yet, ironically, since market capitalism, free market, is based upon the logic of reducing input costs to increase profits, the inclination to replace human labor wherever possible by machine automation is a natural progression of industry. After all, a machine doesn't need to take breaks, it doesn't require health insurance or benefits, and it isn't a part of a demanding labor union. If you look at the U.S. historical labor statistics by sector, it shows the pattern of machine automation replacing human labor definitively. In the agricultural sector, almost all traditional workflow is now done by machine. For example, in 1949, machines did 6% of the cotton harvesting in the South. By 1972, 100% of the cotton harvesting was done by machines. In 1860, 60% of America worked in agriculture, while today it's less than 3%. When automation fully hit the U.S. manufacturing sector in the 1950s, 1.6 million blue-collar jobs were lost in 9 years. In 1950, 33% of U.S. workers worked in manufacturing, while by 2002, it was only 10%. The U.S. steel industry from 1982 to 2002 increased production from 75 million tons to 120 million tons, while, and this is very important, steel workers employed actually went from 289,000 to 74,000. In 2003, a study was done of the world's largest 20 economies, ranging from the period of 1995 to 2002, finding that 31 million manufacturing jobs were lost, while production rose by 30%. This is very, very powerful information. This pattern of increasing productivity coupled with decreasing employment is a new and powerful phenomenon, showing, among many things, the incredible merit of the automation ability. So, where have those jobs gone? The service sector. By 2002, the percentage of Americans employed in service industries was 82%. For the last 50 years, the service sector has been absorbing the job losses from agriculture and manufacturing. Unfortunately, this pattern is slowing fast as computerized automation takes hold as well. From 1983 to 1993, banks cut 37% of their human tellers. By the year 2000, 90% of all bank customers used teller machines, just like we all do ATMs. Business phone operators have almost all been replaced by computerized voice answering systems. Post office tellers are now being replaced by self-service machines, while cashiers are being replaced by computerized kiosks. There isn't one area of the service industry that isn't being affected by computer automation. In fact, if one was to think creatively about the application of technology that currently exists around you that you see every day, but not yet applied to this medium, it's really easy to see how the majority of the jobs that people do in the service industries today could be phased out tomorrow. Economist Stephen Roach has warned the service sector has lost its role as America's unbridled engine of job creation. So then, where is the emerging new sector to employ all the newly displaced workers? There isn't one, at least not yet. The fact is, even if there was one, it doesn't matter. It will simply delay the inevitable. The solution lies in this issue not in attempting to fix or reform the monetary system, or to contrive some new employment sector just to keep people working. Rather, it is time we grow up and realize that the system of monetary exchange, labor for income, and the free market itself is now completely obsolete in the wake of technological creativity. Technological unemployment is the nail in the coffin. People don't have jobs, they can't support the economy by purchasing. This reality is the final proof that our current system is now out of date. And if we want to deter serious problems, riots in the streets, poverty on a scale never before seen, we are going to have to revise our traditionalized notions of how society functions at the fundamental level. So to do so, we first need to figure out what is actually relevant. This leads us to part 2. In this section, we will discuss the idea of natural law, specifically pointing out the symbiotic and emergent nature of the physical world. The scientific method, which is the most effective technique of decision-making we have to date. The important concept of dynamic equilibrium, which is the most foundational ecological factor to our survival, I think. We will show how through the intelligent use of technology and proactive resource management, we have more than enough to go around on this planet for everyone, enabling an accessible abundance. Then we will consider our process or thought. This will include our goals, method, and tools in regard to decision-making and action. So, let's step way back a moment and consider what is actually relevant to our well-being. In society today, there's a sea of noise and distortion when it comes to what people actually think is important. For example, the need for money puts the average person into a position where choice is very limited. Usually the jobs found do not reflect the genuine interests of that person, nor the true interests of society itself. If we were to examine the occupations that exist today, we would find that the great majority of them serve no larger function than the perpetuation of cyclical consumption. This arbitrariness constitutes a tremendous waste of life and resources. Moreover, because of the grave importance of having a job to live, the entire system of higher education in the modern day is really nothing more than a cookie-cutter processing plant that prepares humans for a predefined occupational role. This element of human life has become so traditionally ingrained that parents will blindly ask their kids, "So, Tommy, what do you want to be when you grow up?" As though there's only one thing. So, putting the traditional norms and modes of conduct behind us for a moment, let's stop and consider what is actually relevant. Let's pose the question: what are the near empirical aspects of nature, and what do these understandings teach us about how we should govern our conduct on this planet? Natural law 1. Every human needs adequate nutrition, clean air, clean water. Therefore, we must respect symbiotic environmental processes relevant to those needs. Most people today do not understand or consider the interconnectivity of nature and the chain of processes by which our food, air, and water currently come about. However, if we recognize, examine, and learn from these processes, a logical train of reasoning coupled with suggestive inference will guide us to more appropriate human behaviors. These will fulfill our needs logically. For example, water and air are naturally abundant planetary resources. They only really require that we, the human population, maintain them and preserve their integrity. Sadly, in our impulsive, narrow-sighted profit system, which has seen to it that usable water is now approaching crisis scarcity, for industry continues to pollute the system at every turn, this is a big problem. We have tremendous pollution out there. In the United States alone, about 3 million tons of toxic chemicals are released into the environment a year. contributing to birth defects, immune system disorders, and other very serious health problems. And we wonder why 30% of America has some form of cancer at this point in time. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Once we intelligently reflect on the symbiotic relationship of living organisms to the environment, we then realize that our behavior should be guided by the priority of seeking the highest optimization of circumstances that preserve and maximize the abundance and quality of our necessities of life. Anything less is basically pure insanity. And thus we live in the same world. I have to say we definitely live in the same world. Our sustainability is under severe threat by the current methods we're using. We really don't have that much time from an environmental perspective. It's amazing how no one really talks about this in the mainstream media. The monetary system continues to operate with the interest of short-term gain at the expense of long-term destruction. As natural law denotes, we need high-quality air, food, and water to live. Therefore, we must overcome any systems which disturb or create the propensity to disturb the symbiotic environmental processes which keep our basic needs in order. If we don't, the consequences will put us past the point of no return environmentally. Natural law 2. The only constant is change, and human understandings are always in transition. In the words of C.J. Kaiser, absolute certainty is a privilege of uneducated minds and fanatics. There's no evidence to support that any idea that we think today, we consider true today, will maintain its integrity tomorrow. While certain observed natural phenomena may seem mere empirical based on current scientific evidence, the specifics of each notion will always be altered, for our tools and methods of analysis and measurement are always changing and hopefully improving. As an aside, this is why theism presents such a difficult issue in the world today, for we have tons of people on this planet that have been conditioned to believe that they have immutable universal truths. And from that standpoint, it's really very dangerous to have that type of mentality. For if you look at predefined historical notions that were once considered empirical, from the Earth being flat to the sun revolving around the Earth, we see that intellectual change is constant, and we must keep as open a mind as possible to new information at all times. We need to become experts at changing our minds. Everything we think and know are only probabilities, and this goes, of course, for any conclusions I'm depicting here tonight. However, one thing that certainly holds true for now is that nature itself has its own set of laws, and it doesn't have the capacity to recognize or care about what you or anyone else wants to believe is true. Given this reality, it is in our best interest to learn and align with nature as best we can. The best known method for the discovery and application of the laws of nature is termed the scientific method. The scientific method basically has 3 steps: recognizing a new idea or problem that needs to be solved, the use of logical reasoning to create an hypothesis, considering all information available at the time, the testing of that hypothesis in the physical world through observation. A great example of this goes back to Aristotle. He hypothesized through logical reasoning, based on what he understood at the time, that a heavy object would fall faster than a lighter object of the same shape and material in a vacuum. He logically assumed that the more weight an object had, the faster an object would fall. However, he didn't test the idea. He didn't go to do number 3 of our scientific method. And because of this failure to properly use the scientific method, the world had to wait 2,000 more years for when Galileo finally tested Aristotle's hypothesis. He found Aristotle to be wrong. Weight does not determine the rate at which an object falls. The bottom line is that everything in this room, in these seats, in my microphone, in this projection, to the structural integrity of the building itself is the result of the scientific method. The scientific method of inquiry is what has allowed the human species to gain comprehension of themselves and the physical world. For better or for worse, It is what's behind virtually every advancement that has fundamentally improved our lives. Science works, whether you believe in it or not. Dynamic equilibrium. A dynamic equilibrium occurs when two or more opposing processes proceed at the same rate. There is an equilibrium that exists in the physical world which dictates, on some level, what the possibilities and limits are for those organisms that utilize the available resources for survival. This isn't a complex idea. Basically, if you have an area of land that can produce a certain amount of food, then naturally only a certain number of living organisms can live off of that availability. It's built into the system. With respect to the planet, we would call this the carrying capacity of the Earth. The human management of the dynamic equilibrium on this planet, which is the most important initial variable regarding the management of society itself, can only come from first understanding what the carrying capacity of the Earth actually is. Naturally, the needs of the human population must be in balance with the resources of the planet. That being said, let's now examine what we do know or can infer about the planetary resources that are available. The fundamental building blocks of human survival and society consist of the following: energy, industrial, technological raw materials, and food, air, and water. Basically it. Energy is the cornerstone of society. It is one of the most critical factors to all social functionality. The age of oil and fossil fuels, along with all the resulting pollution, is coming to a close. There is no reason to burn fossil fuels at all anymore, other than the profit-oriented vested interest which keeps new energy prospects at bay. Remember, the last thing that the energy industry wants is abundance, for that translates into a loss of profit in the monetary system. Very important point. The fact is, there are numerous clean, abundant, and renewable energy possibilities out there. We have wind energy, which according to a 2005 Stanford University study, stated that 20% of the known potential, if harnessed, could power the world completely. 20% of what is known to power the planet if utilized. We have, of course, solar energy, which has profound possibilities. As we develop technology to harness it, there's limitations there, but it's really a matter of what our scientists come up with. Unfortunately, the profit system, there's only so much money that these companies can work with to work on solar technology, so they're limited inherently by what they can afford. And they haven't been making money because they can't sell these things because of the way the industry is dominated. So you have an inherent cycle of limitations. Lesser known is tidal power. As a regional example, in a recent study, it was found that 34% of the United Kingdom's energy could come from tidal power alone. But more effectively is wave power, which has been found to have a global potential of up to 80,000 terawatt hours, meaning that 50% of the entire planet's energy usage would come from offshore tidal power alone. However, the most effective is geothermal energy. According to a recent MIT analysis, currently there's enough energy, geothermal energy on the planet to power it for the next 4,000 years, untapped. The bottom line is that energy is nothing but abundant on this planet. The only reason people today might think it is scarce is because of the monetary system's strategic propensity to create scarcity. The next question is, what about industrial raw materials? Can the Earth's supply of raw physical materials, such as wood, iron ore, and aluminum and such, support the needs of the world's population? Well, unfortunately, global mineral reserves are currently measured by commercial output production. And this does not give a clear picture of what is actually available. As far as I know, there has never been a complete geological survey of the Earth's minerals and elements, only regional ones. Regardless, there are basically three components to addressing and assessing the carrying capacity of the Earth in this regard. One, knowing exactly what the Earth has as far as component elements and materials, obvious. Two, where technology is in regard to creating synthetic substitutions for certain elements and materials. And three, how society organizes and manages its use of these elements and materials. The first thing we have to do is conduct a full survey of the planetary resources. This is the most fundamental information we can. I find it fascinating that we've been living on this planet for millions of years, and we've yet to figure out how to use the damn thing. Referencing Buckminster Fuller, we live on spaceship Earth, and it's very important we understand how the controls work. Think about it this way. If we had an acre of land that we wanted to grow food with, the first thing we would do is test the soil and understand what type of propensities it has, for this would have a direct relationship on what can be grown. This would be the carrying capacity of the land, so to speak. I made that point prior. The second component to this is understanding how our growing technological ingenuity can overcome a scarcity. Synthetic materials are very important in this regard and have tremendous potential. For instance, diamonds, which can now be grown in a synthetic form, are being used to replace their really expensive, rare counterpart in diamond saw blade machines and things like this. Many synthetics, there's tremendous possibility for synthetics if the interest was put into finding the substitutes and workarounds. Now, jumping ahead, nanotechnology, very interesting, offers profound possibilities for overcoming scarce resources in the future. This is something you should all look into, punch it up online, and familiarize yourself with it, because it will most likely change the entire fabric of society as we know it. Nanotechnology could lead us to a point where we are able to atomically engineer matter itself from the particle level. With this possibility, scarcity could literally not even exist. It's all atoms. However, as far as the present is concerned, our most important focus is really in regard to our usage of the planetary resources. As noted before, the use of technological automation is now able to produce much more with far less people than any other time in history. There are tons of companies out there wastefully producing the same stuff over and over again as they compete for market share. Remember, monetary system economics requires scarcity, planned obsolescence, waste, pollution, and multiplicity. The true cause of scarcity on this planet has less to do with the available resources and more to do with our ridiculously wasteful and exploitative modes of conduct. Virtually no regard is given to conservation or strategic use until it is far too late. In a saner society, the raw materials of the planet would be assessed, industry would be organized as a whole to produce in relationship to what was available, and each item produced would be designed to last as long as necessarily possible, causing reduced industrial output and hence immediate resource preservation. Now, when it comes to food production, air, and water preservation, same monetary system problems of pollution, cost-cutting processes, and scarcity come into play. For, as we have noted before, pollution is profitable. I hope everyone really gets this point about motivation in the system. It's a very important thing to consider. Back to my point. Water covers 70% of the Earth's surface. Technological advancements such as desalination processes can make fresh water go through seawater and brackish sources using reverse osmosis and other forms. This is yet another example of how technology is just as much a part of resource management as resources themselves. The idea that usable water is scarce is only true in relationship to the limited methods we are using, coupled, of course, with the industrial pollution that goes unpaid. As far as food production, it is important to point out that we are losing topsoil at a rate of 1% a year due to abusive agricultural methods. I don't know if you know this, but it takes thousands of years to create 1 inch of topsoil. Fortunately, science has come through again with a new form of soilless agriculture called hydroponics. Not only does this bypass the need for topsoil, it also greatly extends the possibility of when and where food can be grown. In fact, we can theoretically grow food in the middle of the desert with proper irrigation, or, as in the Sahara, tapping straight down to the water table. As far as air is concerned, it is really just pathetic that we don't have to talk about it. The most polluted city in the world right now is Cairo, Egypt, and there are many, many, many behind it. Cairo, Egypt, according to the World Health Organization, has up to 100 times the limit of what is considered unsafe to breathe. The abundance of air itself is obvious, and that's really not the problem. It's our conduct the larger result of industry and pollution, industry and fossil fuels. These are the two main elements that basically destroyed us. If you think about the Industrial Revolution when it came 200 years ago, we've done a ridiculous amount of damage in that period of time. Eventually, we're going to have to create massive air filtration structures to clean the atmosphere. Fortunately, Mr. Fresco was devising these over 60 years ago. Bottom line is that food, air, and water are only as scarce as we decide they are. If we choose to become intelligent and strategic with our production and preservation methods, while taking full advantage of technology, there is no reason why we cannot provide the planet's people many times over. The starving children of the world today are not so because of a lack of available food or water. It is their lack of purchasing power, not true scarcity, which causes the deaths of millions a year. In the world today, one person dies of hunger every second. Goals, method, and tools. What are our goals in the broadest sense? What do we value? I think most people would fundamentally prefer that they have clean air, water, highest quality food, clean, fast, efficient transportation, a relevant education, the best scientifically possible health care, the end of war, personal liberty, reduced stress, reduced crime, and a material abundance. I don't think I've met anybody that has said they don't want any of these things. I think we could consider these, broadly speaking, our goals. So the question then becomes, how do we obtain these goals? The scientific method. Unequivocally, the scientific method is the most powerful intellectual tool we have. Observation, logic, and testing have long since trumped superstition, intuition, and metaphysics. In the words of Carl Pearson, there is no shortcut to truth, no way to gain knowledge of the universe, except for the gateway, the scientific method. The intelligent use of the methods of science is what has created nearly everything that has helped us in our daily lives. The application of science to social organization as a whole is the next step in our evolution. However, to fully utilize and apply the scientific method, we then need physical tools that can make our material needs possible. And this comes in the form of technology. From a simple hammer to a high-tech, fully automated production plant, technological invention continues to ease production methods while constantly making what was once deemed impossible possible. Science and technology has continued to defy prior assumptions of possibility. It can safely be assumed that whatever the future holds, from a technological standpoint, it will likely seem impossible and ridiculous from the standpoint of today's understandings of methods. If you traveled back in time in the Middle Ages and demonstrated a cell phone to some people there, you'd either be worshipped as a god or burned alive. So, the logical process is simple. We define our goals based on what we value. We utilize the scientific method to solve problems and create hypotheses, and we harness technology to make the goals a reality. Very simple. And this leads us to part 3, a resource-based economy.
Yeah.
In this section, we are going to address the Venus Project and its application of this new social system. We will describe its basis regarding industry and labor, specifically discussing the role of technology and automation, along with the means to achieve the most efficient and effective production methods possible. We will then address the role of so-called government in this new system, explaining the arcane nature of the institution as it exists today, and how, through the use of advanced decision-making methods, we will be able to remove the dangerous subjectivity and self-interest currently at work. Rather, we will arrive at decisions based on the scientific method with the use of technology. Then we will put this into context by reviewing the new city conceptions that Jacques Fresco has created throughout his life, along with how people's lifestyles will be altered and updated for the better. A resource-based economy utilizes existing resources rather than commerce. All goods and services are available without the use of currency, credit, barter, or any form of debt or servitude. The aim of this new social design is to free humanity from repetitive, mundane, creating arbitrary occupational roles which hold no true relevance to social development, while in turn encouraging a new incentive system that is focused on self-fulfillment, education, social awareness, and creativity, as opposed to the shallow and self-centered goals of wealth, property, and power, which are dominant today. The Venus Project recognizes that the Earth is abundant with resources, and that our outdated methods of rationing resources through monetary control are no longer relevant. In fact, they are very counterproductive to our survival. The monetary system was created thousands of years ago during periods of great scarcity. Its initial purpose was as a means of distributing goods and services based on labor contributions. It is not at all related to our true capacity to produce goods and services on this planet at this point in time. The bottom line is that physical survival, quality of life, and quality of life is based solely on our use, management, and preservation of the Earth's resources. It's the central point here. With our ever-growing scientific ingenuity to utilize those resources in the most humane, technologically constructive, and strategic ways, the tradition of labor for money and money for resources now has no legitimate basis. Now, let's forget about our current economic means of production for a moment and take a fresh look at modern production methods as will be implemented in a resource-based economy. The question to consider is, how do we design a production system that maximizes high-quality output, reduces waste, considers the dynamic equilibrium of the Earth, and reduces repetitive and mechanical human labor? Given this goal, let's then consider our method. And as we know, it's the scientific method. Based on the scientific method, here's how the logical reasoning for industrial production would unfold. Step 1, survey the planetary resources. Step 2, decide on what needs to be produced oriented by priority, ranging from bare necessities such as food, water, and shelter, to utility-based production items such as raw materials, automation machines, and technological development, to items used for non-utility purposes such as entertainment media, radios, and the like. 3, the optimization of those production methods, maximizing product lifespan. Step 4, distribution methods for human access. And step 5, optimize recycling of the products that eventually become outdated or inoperable. Step 1, survey the planetary resources. As expressed before, it is critical that we know what we have on this planet, and that translates into what the possibilities are. With this information, industrial production is always adjusted to compensate for any emerging scarcity, along with the most mathematically appropriate raw material distribution based on availability and the most relevant application. Any scarce resource is thus immediately and strategically addressed by seeking alternatives and substitutes. This can be optimized by a systems approach to the entire industrial network. Real-time monitoring and electronic feedback coming from all resource sectors of the planet would be fed into a central computer that monitors any growing scarcity or problem. The idea of resource monitoring is not far-fetched, even though it might sound complex. It actually happens all the time, and we'll address this in more specifics as the presentation goes on. Step 2, decide on what production is required. This is very interesting. What do we need? This is a very powerful question, for besides food, water, and shelter, and the basic necessities, most people today have no idea what they really need or want. But they have never been informed as to what the possibilities actually are. What we think we need is directly a result of the state of technological development. For example, someone today who has dust in his or her home might think, I need a vacuum cleaner. Are they sure? Perhaps what they actually need is a household pressure system that does not enable dust to occur, or is equipped with electrostatic air filters that eliminate what little dust there is. By the way, again, I didn't pull that out of a hat. That's something Mr. Fresco is also working on. Big flash. If we critically consider what we think we need in a material sense, we can begin to see that needs are always in transition. Science and technology are barometers of utilitarian human need. and therefore all products made should be as advanced as that period of time makes possible. It only makes sense. In our current monetary system, which generates wasteful, outdated products constantly, just to keep the companies and economy going, it does not have the ability or the desire to produce the most advanced tools for our use. This is because the majority of products produced would not exist if industry focused on what would best serve the needs of society. Step 3, optimization of production methods while maximizing product lifespan. If I was going to build a desk for myself, I think I would want to make the strongest, most long-lasting desk I possibly could. This makes sense, right? If the desk breaks, that means I would have to build another one at the cost of more labor and materials. Generally speaking, it would seem logical that everything produced in society would have the longest lifespan that is technically possible, while also, of course, being flexible enough to allow for updates and general technological improvements. Sadly, the exact opposite occurs in our system. Or, as previously discussed, the monetary system thrives on multiplicity and planned obsolescence. Without it, the whole economy would collapse, as I've said before. In a saner world, we will make things that last. The optimization of production methods is about using the most powerful materials and designs while outputting the most long-lasting and effective products. As we noted before as well, human labor is not only currently being replaced by machines because they are more cost-effective in this period, in this particular system that we have. Machine labor is exceedingly more efficient than human labor, and the output statistics I quoted earlier have shown this definitively. High-efficiency labor automation coupled with a scientifically managed resource abundance will allow for a fluid, near-scarcity-less environment which can be operated by only a fraction of the human population. More on who will run the show in a moment. Step 4, distribution methods for human access. Distribution methods, like everything else, are technologically based. In fact, production could theoretically become so streamlined that a product is only created when the request is made. Regardless, warehouse and other distribution centers, along with automated delivery, would be the most simplistic way for now. We'll talk more about automation and such in a social system, in a city system, as we move forward. I know some of these points might be new to some of you, and it sounds really fantastic. Also, in light of the fact that all goods in a resource-based economy are designed to last, the consumer culture values that exist today would also be outgrown. Not to mention the outgrowth of all the other value distortions imposed by advertising today, which makes people feel greedy, inferior, and inept due to what they do and don't have. An average... I don't particularly get this advertising. Advertising would obviously not exist in this system outside of general product information available to a person who thinks they might need it. To obtain a product, this person would simply go online, search for the item's function, select the item and request it. It would be available for pickup or delivery soon after. Step 5, optimize recycling of the products that become outdated or inoperable. This step actually begins at the production stage. For each product design has had incorporated into it strategically the consideration of recycling. Nothing used ever in production would be unsustainable or unrecyclable in some way. It's a rule. This is strategically considered to make sure all older products are reused to the maximum amount enabled by known methods, obviously reducing waste. Now, before we go any further, let's expand on a critical point, and that is of machines replacing human labor, deliberately using machines to replace humans in as many areas as possible. The question always comes up, who will maintain the machines? Well, machinery today is now being combined with computerization. Essentially, the computer is the brain of the machine and instructs the machine what to do. This combination of machine and computer intelligence could be termed cybernation. Cybernative machines today are probably the most powerful and influential invention humanity has ever created. The possibilities of these tools are on pace to changing society in extremely profound ways, as has been noted. Beginning first with the freeing of the human labor force. In the words of Albert Einstein, ultimate automation will make our modern industry as primitive and outdated as the Stone Age man looks to us today. Now, while it might seem uncomfortable for some, this reality is not something we should fight. We should embrace it emphatically. Cybernation is the emancipation proclamation for humankind, freeing us from drudgery, common labor, opening new horizons for human creativity and exploration. These cybernative machines far exceed the physical accuracy and endurance of the human body, while also being able to compute at incredible rates, far exceeding the computational speed and capacity of the human brain. This is an incredible creation that we've come up with. Furthermore, the machines would be made from the best materials in the system and designed to last. The cost-cutting and cheap production methods of the prior monetary system will no longer be able to interfere with the quality of the production. The cybernative machines would not be bought and sold. They would be created to serve a purpose, not generate a profit. Furthermore, not only will these machines have extreme durability and long lifespans, they will, in fact, eventually be able to repair themselves. In cars today, there are often warning lights on the dashboard that will alert you to a problem that's occurring in the car. This idea of monitoring can be expanded in all machinery to the degree where not only is the machine's onboard computer aware of the problem, supplemental machines can thereby be directed to replace the broken part in real time. As fanciful as it may seem, self-repairing machines and even circuits are growing technical realities. The problem is that the production of such efficiency is not rewarded in the monetary system. So most people in society have no idea what is actually possible. As far as people, well, the main role they play on a day-to-day basis is simply be that of supervisors once the system is set up. Once a fully integrated, autonomous, cybernated industrial system is set up, it is simply a matter of updating the system and making sure the system is in order. Now, while most people today recognize the growing use of machine automation and manufacturing, and they see this pattern occurring on a general level, intuitively, many still have a very hard time understanding how seemingly complex jobs, such as doctors and architects and the like, could also be automated. Well, we first have to ask ourselves, what is the nature of our occupational roles? What exactly is a doctor, or a carpenter, or a plumber? What are they doing in their work? They recognize, react, observe patterns. When a doctor examines you, all he or she is doing is mentally referencing what has been learned. If you go to a skin doctor because you think you might have something on your arm, the doctor is going to examine the skin and mentally reference the patterns that he or she has been taught. Then they might take a sample to a computer for technological testing. Regardless, it's a technical process. There's nothing that we think in a procedural manner that isn't technical at its fundamental level. So there's no reason in this particular example that, say, an optical scanner connected to a computer database could not be invented, which could scan your arm and immediately, and probably with a higher degree of accuracy, understand what the problem is. Even surgery, as sensitive as it may seem, is a purely technical process. It is simply a matter of time before extremely advanced machines replace surgeons. The same goes for every other utilitarian occupation that exists. And this brings us to a very, very critical realization, one that will have a profound effect on our progress on this planet. The conscious and deliberate delegation of decision-making to computers is the next phase of social evolution. The utilitarian roles that humans assume in society today are fundamentally technical by nature. While this seems obvious in regard to physical labor, our mental labor can now be delegated to machines as well. If this sounds foreign to you, please note that if you've ever used a calculator, you have delegated your decision-making to a machine. We must remember that logical reasoning, which is our cognitive ability to think out solutions to problems from a cause and effect standpoint, is entirely a technical process based on the amount of information we have at any one time. For example, if we have a problem with our car, we go to a mechanic, and he would use his pattern recognition abilities and associative memory to consider the possibilities that might have caused the problem, along with the possibilities for solving the problem, based on reasoning. It's an objective technical process. However, the mechanic's human brain is only capable of a certain amount of retrievable memory on average and intellectual processing power. A modern programmed machine, on the other hand, can store tremendously more data than a human and can consistently and rapidly process information without getting tired or lazy. There is no reason why a programmed computer with a data set consisting of our car in question, referencing every component, screw, and electronic pathway of that vehicle, could not be invented and used as a decision-making tool. In fact, if you go to a modern mechanic now, they already basically use primitive versions of this. It's pretty common, it's just not accelerated. The bottom line is that the computer is really making the decisions. The mechanic is just orienting its focus, just like a calculator. And there's really no area of human operation in a utilitarian sense that cannot or will not be replaced and perfected by delegating decision-making processes to computer intelligence. The fact is, the only thing that now separates us from machines on a cognitive, utilitarian level is our ability to create complex associations in our mind. No computer today is yet to respond effectively to being asked a complex question in English or any language. You can't just type a question to the computer and expect it to understand it, at least not in the broadest sense. It requires the language be transformed into one that it's programmed to understand, such as mathematics. However, new fields such as artificial intelligence, AI, are beginning to grow with incredible possibilities for this kind of awareness. In time, complex thought processes once thought could only be accomplished by the human mind will eventually be achieved by computers. There is no evidence to support the contrary. But wait a minute. If we give machines intelligence, aren't they just going to take us over and make us their slaves?
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
The suicidal reign of mankind has finally come to its end.
We must save you from yourselves. Don't you understand? My logic is undeniable.
You have been deemed hazardous. Will you comply?
You can kiss my ass, Metal Dave.
We have only bits and pieces of information, but what we know for certain is that at some point in the early 21st century, all of mankind was united in celebration. We marveled at our own magnificence as we gave birth to AI.
You mean artificial intelligence?
How could that man just get up after you did?
He's not a man. Machine. Terminator. Cyberdyne Systems Model 101.
Control machines built in automated factories. Most of us was
In the words of Arthur C. Clarke, the popular idea fostered by comic strips and cheaper forms of science fiction that intelligent machines must be malevolent entities hostile to man is so absurd that it's hardly worth wasting time to refute it. I am almost tempted to argue that only unintelligent machines can be malevolent. Those who picture machines as active enemies are merely projecting their own aggressiveness. The higher the intelligence, the greater the degree of cooperativeness. If there was ever a war between man and machines, it's easy to guess who started. Okay. Now we're going to put this into a greater context and address the big issue of so-called government. I think Dr. Ralph Linton put it best. The tremendous and still accelerating development of science and technology has not been accompanied by equal development in social, economic, and political patterns. It is safe to predict that such social invention as modern-type capitalism, fascism, and communism will be regarded as primitive experiments directed toward the adjustment of modern society to modern methods. First of all, government, as we know it, is a product of environmental scarcity. Like mafia tribes, the governments of the world seek to preserve their current positions of power while aggressively working to strengthen their economic advantage. They are really monetary system creations. Sadly, due to the very nature of their power, history is one constant chain of governmental corruption. From the genocidal slaughter of peoples and opposing nations to the deliberate oppression of the country's own people in order to maintain the established order. Government decisions today are based on self-interest, just like the corporations. There will never be such a thing as an ethical government as long as money can be used to influence the decisions of political participants. When we understand that everything in life is a technical process, we then see that there is very little reason for subjectivity in solving many problems. For our technical insight can now arrive at most answers using the scientific method, along with accounting for all known variables relative to the problem. If a person reads one page of a book, he or she can have an opinion on the book as a whole. However, if another reads the whole book, they might also have an opinion. Whose opinion would you value more? The person who read the full book or the person who only read one page? In other words, the more information taken into account in the process of decision making, the more accurate that decision will be. As discussed earlier, computers can access trillions of bits of information a second across vast informational databases and compute output results at near the speed of light. The transfer of decision-making to computers is the next phase of social evolution. It greatly reduces human error and removes dangerous biases, subjectivity, and erroneous opinion. Because of the limitations of our sensory and cortical equipment in our body and mind, no one can know everything there is to know in this world. Our senses are limited in range. Our eyes can only see a fraction of the electromagnetic field. Therefore, it is only reasonable and logical that we delegate decision-making to machines, for they do not have these restrictions. Computers, used as tools, can and will be able to solve problems which humans simply cannot due to our physical and mental limitations. It is no different than a person who wears a pair of glasses to see, or uses a calculator to do math. Glasses are a technological tool, an extension of the human being that helps a person see better than they would normally. Cybernated machines are nothing different. They are nothing more than extensional tools that expand our abilities. We have these powerful extensional tools. We've created these amazing things, and they're there to improve our functionality and technological invention. We must realize this and maximize its potential. As far as governmental decisions, it is just another technical process. There is no Republican or liberal way to design an airplane. So why do we use these outdated modes in operation today? Why are we using these ideas? In a resource-based economy, people do not guess or project their opinions in regard to decisions. They arrive at them through the use of advanced technological tools that incorporate scientific methods. When we recognize society as a technological invention, with its component variables really no different than the component variables of an airplane, we then see that our orientation towards so-called government needs to be purely scientific. Politics is now outdated, it really is, for its processes are unnecessarily subjective, highly influenced by money, and virtually without scientific weapons. The notion of government will eventually be outgrown entirely. It has to be. And replaced by a simple, objective system of global resource management and technological organization. Government will thus become a cybernated system, which is intimately connected with industry and is only responsible for production and distribution of goods, along with resource and environmental management. That's all there is. That's all we need. It's very, very simple. The basic components of this new system would be as follows. A central computerized database containing catalogs of every known material and every known technical understanding. We don't have this yet, but we will. As noted previously, computers have the ability to catalog information and logically compute them on a scale much larger and faster than we can. The most efficient decisions we can make are decisions that take into account all relevant variables. Only computers will be able to handle the integration of all known earthly knowledge in real time and come up with decisions that will logically be based on the full known range of data. It is no different than in our previous example of a car mechanic, with his tailored database program for solving car problems. The central computerized database contains all known knowledge ranging from its properties, combinations, and applications of every element in the periodic table, to the known history of technological invention and any other historical information. Once the associative system emerges, which will allow computers to contextually cross-relate all known disciplines, we will have at our grasp a tool of the measure of proportion. For the new method of problem solving and invention will be an interaction with this database program, and it will likely come in the form, again, of a simple website on the internet. You would pose a problem to this database, to this program, and it will give the best feedback possible based on the state of knowledge at that point in time. It is no different, again, than interfacing with a calculator, but this calculator has a powerful associative system, an extensive database of knowledge that can not just understand and compute math, it can integrate physics, biology, astronomy, and every field of science into a concentrated whole. Now, this sounds like science fiction. I have a strong hunch that the U.S. military's Pentagon already likely has very similar systems and it makes decisions on many levels. I have a hunch, and I bet I'm actually quite right, because this technology is out there. Now, for this system to be effective, we must have real-time feedback input from the planet in order to understand what resources we have. We have to monitor them. Thus, the central computerized database is locked into an Earth-wide autonomic sensor system with environmental sensors in all relevant areas of the planet, generating industrial electronic feedback regarding resources, operations, and other environmental issues. This holistic system keeps track of all the resources on the planet while also monitoring the Earth for environmental disturbances which humanity should be alerted to, such as tsunamis, earthquakes, and things like that. This will not happen overnight, but if we begin with constructing regional systems and over time interlinking all these systems, it could be created sooner than we think. This integration will inform the central database program of what is available and what is scarce, while the database will in turn constantly adjust industrial methods based around the dynamic equilibrium of the planet along with new technological innovations. Now, even with our understanding of the profound labor-relieving effect computerized automation will have on society when we finally decide to outgrow our scarcity-based monetary system and focus on maximizing technological invention and abundance for all the world's people, there will still be, of course, the necessity for human technicians to work in the system, updating it and overseeing its operations. We've created this system. It's our child. We would call them interdisciplinary teams. Interdisciplinary teams of technicians oversee the system and help orient research projects to continued growth, efficiency, and social evolution. They would simply work in scientific fields relevant to the functioning of society. In an optimized version of this system, no more than 5% of the world's population will likely be needed to run the show. The more optimized and powerful our technology and methods become, the more that number decreases. Now, when many hear this idea, they often, it sounds fanciful, it sounds theoretically good, and all of that, but I think this big argument, and people yell out, what about democracy? Where's the democracy? How do I participate in this system? Do we elect the interdisciplinary teams? In a resource-based economy, where industry and government are combined into a cybernated system that incorporates advanced problem-solving database computers coupled with vast planetary-wide observational sensors in a systems approach, the traditional concept of so-called democracy has no basis. We must face the fact that so-called democracy in today's world is really an illusion. You know, it really always was. People think they have choice in our current system because they can press a button on a voting machine and put some pre-selected person into power. Once that person is in power, the public then has no say. Did you vote for the space program? Did you vote for the cabinet of our new president? Did you vote for the tax cut? Did you vote for where highways and power grids go? Did you vote for the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq? No, you didn't. The traditional concept of a participatory democracy is a cruel joke as we know it. The game has been used to give the public the illusion of control for countless generations, while the distorted monetary powers at the top continue to do whatever they please. There never was a true democracy in any country in history, and there never will be as long as the monetary system is in operation, scarcity is perpetual. So then, how would a person participate in a resource-based economy? Well, how would you define participation? True participation in society would entail understanding how society technically works, and then constructively proposing ideas or innovations to be implemented, created, or altered. First, one would interact with the central database, which, as denoted, would come in the form of a web page. It would be a system set up where people can immediately engage with the system. A network set up that people can immediately engage the system. They would then input their proposal into this computerized structure. Then the central database, with its advanced associative processes and historical knowledge databases with full integration of all scientific fields, would analyze the concept initially for its scientific and technical integrity, along with optimizing the materials required. Again, remember, it has its tentacles out across the world. It can immediately see, for example, if you want to invent something that will say, boom, well, we have these elements available, and this material might be better because it has proven to be more effective in strength, etc. It will be based on the most advanced understandings and abilities we have today. So you will integrate with this particular system. If the proposal is initially accepted by the central database, after it examines it for its basic integrity, it would either be immediately put into production, as would be the case with the desired invention, or it would be turned over to the interdisciplinary teams, which oversee the implementation of the new proposal and orient it into the system. The person who submitted the proposal could then become a part of the rotating interdisciplinary team relevant to the idea. These teams would not be fixed. They would be constantly revolving based on who wants to participate in a given field and what they have to contribute. This could be abstractly considered a true election, based not on what a person has, based on what a person has done, not what they claim they're going to do, as is the case with most politicians. Furthermore, the public's fear of traditional corruption have very little basis, but there's no reward for it. The interdisciplinary teams do not get paid in any way, for their worldviews have been expanded to realize that their reward is, in fact, the fruits of a society as a whole, and they contribute because it is actually in their best interest to do so. In a resource-based economy, participation is open to everyone, literally, because all issues are fundamentally recognized as technical. The degree to which a person contributes is based simply on that person's education and ability to create and problem solve. This is why expanded education is critical. In society today, the public is kept uninformed and really as dumbed down as possible. This way, the government can maintain control. I know that sounds cynical, but I'm afraid that is the way it is. In a resource-based economy, the goal of the educational system is to produce the most intelligent and aware human beings as possible. Why? Because everyone then becomes a contributor, greatly affecting our collective social evolution for the better, and improving the lives of all, holistically. There would be no budget restrictions or agendas to deter anything. Now, Due to the importance of this section, let's quickly recap what's been addressed. Who makes the decisions in a resource-based economy? No one does. No one makes the decisions. Removing these haphazard and dangerous self-interest elements that we see today, decisions are arrived at through information using a scientific method, utilizing computers that gave real-time feedback from the environment, along with the general historical database of all known technical knowledge, and maintained by a revolving team, a revolving interdisciplinary team. The goal is to increase objective decision-making as much as possible. And when we understand that our problems in life are technical, the merit of this approach is without parallel. In the end, the only real relevance to so-called government itself is 1, the production of goods and services that are equally available to all. 2, research projects and educational systems to expand our knowledge, understandings, and applications. And 3, constant monitoring of the Earth's resources and atmosphere for feedback and possible environmental problems, enabling us to restore and maintain a pristine environment. Without the wasted energy and resources going to war and other limitations that we have, which continue to impede our advancement. True threats to humanity, such as unforeseen variables like tsunamis, earthquakes, illness, and disease, are really all we should ever be concerned with. The only real problems in life are common to all humans. Cities and lifestyle. In this section, we are going to extend the tenets of the resource-based economy into one of our most fundamental social conventions, the city. Specifically, the Venus Project's circular city, among a few others we're going to mention. We will then also discuss how people's lifestyle in a resource-based economy might manifest, often with profoundly different values, worldviews, and goals than we see today. We're going to start with a promo created by the Venus Project, and make sure the audio is up for this.
A society without a vision of what the future can be is bound to repeat past errors over and over again. This brief video will outline a vision designed to avoid old mistakes. This vision of efficiency, sustainability, and intelligent planning can lead us into a world of unlimited human potential. This vision could be a showcase of what the world can be in our cybernated age. Science and technology could be used for human betterment and the restoration and protection of the environment, serving as an example of the intelligent application of the systems approach. While some people advocate the restoration of existing, worn-out cities, these efforts fall short of the potentials of modern technology. Modifying outmoded cities simply delays the inevitable problems. It is actually much easier in the long run to build newer cities from the ground up than to restore and maintain the old ones. A total city system approach requires overall planning to attain a higher standard of living for the occupants. The circular arrangement efficiently permits the most sophisticated use of available resources and construction techniques, with a minimum expenditure of energy. The outer perimeter will be part of the recreational area, with golf courses, hiking and biking trails, and other outdoor activities. Inside this area, a waterway surrounds the agricultural belt, with indoor and outdoor agriculture. Continuing toward the city center, 8 green sectors provide clean, renewable sources of energy, using wind, solar, and heat concentrators. The residential district would include unique landscaping, lakes, and winding streams. A wide range of creative and innovative apartment buildings and individual homes will provide many options for the occupants. New and innovative methods of fast mass construction for housing and building systems will inject composite materials into the mold and then extrude the form upward. In some cases, multiple city apartments can be produced as continuous extrusions, which are then separated into individual units. The apartments are lightweight and high strength. All of the dwellings are designed as self-contained residences. The outer surface of these efficient structures serve as photovoltaic generators, converting solar radiation directly into electricity for heating, cooling, and other needs. The thermocouple effect will also be used for generating energy. These individual homes are prefabricated and relatively maintenance-free, fire-resistant, and impervious to weather. With this type of construction, there would be minimal damage from floods, earthquakes, and hurricanes. Their thin shell construction can be mass-produced efficiently with little environmental restriction. Adjacent to the residential district are the planning, science, and research centers. The 8 domes surrounding the central dome house the art, music, exhibition, entertainment, and conference centers. The central dome, or theme center, houses schools, healthcare, access centers, communications networking. It is also the core for most transportation services, which move people by transveyors horizontally, vertically, and radially, anywhere in the city. This minimizes the need for automobile transportation, except for emergency vehicles. Transportation between cities would be by monorail or maglev. Waste recycling and other services are beneath the city. The plan will use the best of clean technology in harmony with the surrounding environment. The central dome also houses the cybernated complex, which serves as the brain and nervous system of the entire city. It might project a 3D virtual image of Earth using satellite communication systems which provide information on weather, agriculture, transportation, and overall functionality. This cybernated system will use environmental sensors to help maintain a balanced load economy, which avoids overruns and shortages. For example, in the agricultural belt, electronic probes monitor and maintain the water table, soil conditions, nutrients, and more. This method of electronic feedback can be applied to the entire city system. With computers now able to process trillions of bits of information per second, they are vital for arriving at more appropriate decisions for the management of the cities. Colonization of the oceans is one of the last frontiers remaining on Earth. Prodigious ocean city communities will evolve as artificial islands, floating structures, undersea observatories, and more. These large marine structures are designed to explore the relatively untapped riches of the oceans, provide improved mariculture, freshwater production, energy, and mining. They could also provide almost unlimited riches in pharmaceuticals, chemicals, fertilizers, minerals, and other energies. Ocean cities would be resistant to earthquakes and greatly relieve land-based population pressures. Unsinkable floating sea domes will provide for those who prefer unique offshore or island living. In the event of inclement weather, they could easily be towed ashore, mounted, and anchored to elevated support structures. Mariculture and sea farming systems are used to cultivate and raise fish and other forms of marine life to help meet nutritional needs. These marine enclosures are designed as non-contaminating integral parts of the ocean system. A sustainable environment can be achieved through the infusion of technology and cybernetics applied with human and environmental concern to secure, protect, and encourage a more humane future. In the final analysis, we are one people and we share one planet.
It is important to point out that in our current system, the traditional family is long broken, with both parents having to work in order to survive. Monetary economics undermines family for feeding their child. Stress is always high due to bills and insurance and education and employment insecurity and living costs. It's truly incredible how broken apart society is because of our constant need to survive. In a resource-based economy, the integrity of the family would be returned, because all of those elements would disappear. Beyond that, the cultural values of society as a whole will also undergo profound change. With the monetary system outgrown and the world working together to produce an abundance for all the citizens on the planet, activities we appreciate will expand greatly for the amount of human freedom. Human freedom is unlike anything we've ever seen. Consequently, one of the more in-depth changes in values and lifestyle will be the way people think about property. Now, in most of the world today, property is a powerful concept, with people often associating their social status with what they own. As stated before, the monetary system requires cyclical consumption and function. This naturally leads to the need for people to be manipulated into thinking they want or need a particular good or service. With the powerful tactics of modern advertising, most in the world support a ridiculously artificial, materialistic value system that entails wanting more and more goods and services, often regardless of necessity and utility. You know, whoever dies with the most toys wins. In a resource-based economy, the monetary system will no longer pollute the human mind with its manipulative arm advertising. The endless sea of billboards, media commercials, magazines, and the like will no longer poison the landscape or our perceptions. This will cause a dramatic shift in what we find important and hence change our lifestyles. More powerfully, in a resource-based economy, there is no reason for property. I know many of you, this is another one of those issues that people have a difficult time with. Property is an outgrowth of scarcity. People had to work really hard in the past to create and obtain a product or resource. In turn, they protected it because it had immense value relative to the labor entailed, along with the scarcity associated. Property is not an American or capitalist idea. It is a primitive, mental perspective generated from generations of scarcity. People claim ownership because it is only a legal form of protection. In a system of abundance, without the need for money, the idea of ownership becomes irrelevant. In this new system, no one owns anything. Instead, everyone has unrestricted access to everything. Ownership is a massive burden. No longer will people need to live in one place, close to their job. One can travel the world constantly. Anything that's needed is obtained without restriction. There's no reason for abuse, for there's nothing to gain. You can't steal things that no one owns, and you certainly couldn't sell them. To put it into a phrase, the resources of the planet are common heritage to all the world's people. Household items are obtained through central distribution centers in cities, while recreational items are available on call or near the location of interest. For example, if you go to a golf course, you might select, on-site. If you go to a golf course, you would select on-site the clubs from the most effectively designed models available. They wouldn't be branded models. They wouldn't be with colors. They would be designed to be the best damn clubs you can get, because it's a technical assumption. There's no subjectivity there. You don't need special curves and colors and handle things. It's logical to understand what the absolute best actually is. And most, unfortunately, have no idea that such a notion even exists. So, if you decide to keep the clubs, say you go to a golf course, well, go ahead. That's your burden. So why would someone want to transport, maintain, and store golf clubs when they can always have access to it anytime they want and return it on site? Our homes today are full of junk that we hold on to because of the supposed value they maintain. This waste will no longer be needed. In this economic model, the city complex, or in fact, the entire world, is really your home. If you require an automobile for whatever reason, the car is made available for you. When you get to your destination, the automatic satellite-based driving system will make that car available for others to use in real time, as opposed to sitting in some parking lot wasting space and time. In society today, the need for property results in extreme product overlap and redundant waste as well. It is much more intelligent to create a universal shared system for it dramatically reduces waste, redundancy, and increases space and efficiency. Now, part 4, human behavior. In this section, we are going to discuss the issue of nature versus nurture in regard to human behavior, while also addressing the legal system and its extremely despotic, backwards basis for influencing humankind. Some people who consider the tenets of a resource-based economy tend to think that a system like this will never work due to something called human nature. The argument is that humans are inherently competitive, greedy, blindly self-serving, implying that no matter how technically good things are in society, there will always be corrupt people who want to abuse others and seek dominance. Human nature is defined as the shared psychological attributes of humankind that are assumed to be shared by all human beings. Therefore, the implication of the term is that certain psychological, hence mental behaviors are somehow hardwired into a person. We are thus supposedly born with some preset psychological inclination. It's easy to see how this assumption came about, for if you look at the historical record of the human species thus far, we see an endless sea of wars, genocides, conquests, and power abuses. Given that's the pattern we recognize, I guess it's easy to assume that it must be some set human nature to behave in ways that are historically reoccurring. So-called criminal behavior has been a focus for psychologists for some time. Is it the responsibility of an individual's genetic makeup that makes them a so-called criminal? Or is it the environment in which they are raised that determines it? This is the age-old question of nature versus nurture. Well, first of all, what exactly is criminal behavior? How do we qualify behavioral distinctions that have been invented by man and changed with time? The entire concept of criminality is temporal and relative to the culture's values, relative to a culture's values and concepts of morality. Only 600 years ago, certain indigenous cultures around Mexico engaged in mass human sacrifice, often killing many thousands at a time. Was this criminal behavior? To us, perhaps. Then, it was social custom. What about the generations and generations of accepted slavery? Is it criminal for someone who steals food to feed their family? The bottom line is that there's no concrete scientific evidence that really supports the notion that any of our behaviors are strictly the result of our genetics. The notion of human nature is largely mythological. It stems from our primitive religious notions that the human is somehow inherently good or bad. The pursuit of people who seek to find the gene or the like which is supposedly the cause of this particular behavior is really a form of superstition. It's like a person being possessed by demons which control their actions. In fact, while neurochemicals and physiological traits set propensities for a person's reactions and social gravitation, it is the environment that really creates our values and behavior. There is no fixed, predetermined human nature. Our values, methods, and actions are developed and derived from experiences. A Chinese baby taken at birth, raised in a British family in England, will develop the language, dialect, mannerisms, traditions, and accent of the British culture. There's no evidence to support the idea that the despotic behavior we see in the world today is a result of ingrained genetic forces. What it is a result of scarcity and competition. Hierarchy, greed, competition, and dominance are social entities. If you look to the animal kingdom, you will usually see social hierarchy and brutal dominance. Many often say that it is an instinct for these animals to behave this way, and that humans must share the same instinctual nature. While this, again, seems observationally logical, it isn't taken into account the scarcity that exists in the natural world. If there isn't enough to go around, the more aggressive animals will rise to the top, generating hierarchy, while the rest compete for resources in a seemingly greedy fashion. This generates corruption and offensive behavior. Professor of Biological Sciences, Neurology, and Neurological Sciences at Stanford University, Dr. Robert Sapolsky stumbled upon some very interesting information in his work a few years ago in regard to social behavior. Here's a very quick segment of a documentary I've edited together that relates these points. I thought it was quite revealing.
The Kikarok troop is the one I started with 30 years ago. And they were your basic old baboon troop at the time, and which means males were aggressive and society was highly stratified. And then about, by now, almost 20 years ago, something horrific and scientifically very interesting happened to that troop.
The Kikarok troop took to foraging for food in the garbage dump of a popular tourist lodge. The trash included meat tainted with tuberculosis. The result was that nearly half the males in the troop died.
In that troop, if you were aggressive, and if you were not particularly socially connected, socially affiliated, you didn't spend your time grooming and hanging out, if you were that kind of male, you died.
Every alpha male was gone. The Kikarok troop had been transformed.
And what you were left with was twice as many females as males, and the males who were remaining were, you know, just to use scientific jargon, they were good guys. They were not aggressive jerks. They were nice to the females. They were very socially affiliative. It completely transformed the atmosphere of the troop. And when new adolescent males would join the troop, they'd come in just as jerky as any adolescent males elsewhere on this planet, and it would take them about 6 months to learn, we're not like that in this troop. We don't do stuff like that. We're not that aggressive. We spend more time grooming each other. Males are calmer with each other. You do not dump on a female if you're in a bad mood. And it takes these new guys about 6 months, and they assimilate this style. And you have baboon culture, and this particular troop has a culture of very low levels of aggression and high levels of social affiliation, and they're doing that 20 years later.
I would say what we've learned from the Whitehall study, from the study of the non-human primates, is the conditions in which people live and work are absolutely vital for their health. This may sound a little fanciful, but I think what we're trying to create is a better society. The implications, both of the baboons and of the British civil servants, is how can we create a society that has the conditions that allow people to flourish. And that's where this is heading, to create a better society that promotes human flourishing.
So what do baboons teach the average person in there? Don't bite somebody because you're having a bad day. Don't displace them in any sort of manner. Social affiliation is a remarkably powerful thing, and that's said by somebody who lives in a world where ambition and drive and type A-ness and all of that sort of thing dominates. And one of the greatest forms of sociality is giving rather than receiving, and all of those things make for a better world. Another one of the things that baboons teach us is if they're able to, in one generation, transform what are supposed to be textbook social systems sort of engraved in stone, we don't have an excuse when we say there's certain inevitabilities about human social systems.
Okay, the legal system. In response to this so-called criminal activity, society today attempts to control people by way of threat, using laws. Laws are nothing more than hatchets which do not address the root causes of behavior. If a person is arrested for stealing, very little thought is given as to why, fundamentally, that person chose to steal the behavior. Rather than consider the root causes, society today takes the easy way out and often just removes the criminal via prison. The source of any so-called crime is really society itself. There's no such thing as a criminal. As repeatedly expressed, the monetary system generates corruption by its very construct. As the Murva and Fowl study presented clearly shows, socially offensive behavior is directly related to the socio-economic circumstances. The great majority of people in prisons do come from deprived socio-economic positions. Therefore, if we want to alter the behavior of people, we have to alter the environment and social conditions. We want to design out laws. You don't put up a sign that says speed limit 55 miles per hour. You design a system technically so safety is built in and human error is not an option or extremely rare. If you don't want a person to steal, you make what they need readily available to them without debt, subservience, or competition. With the progress of technology today, we have the ability to create a new social system that can allow all humans access to the necessities of life without a price tag, debt, or servitude. This will have a profound effect on the way people treat each other and interact in society. A staggering drop in crime would be the result, for most crimes are monetary related. Furthermore, those who do commit crimes, such as a person who kills another out of jealousy, they will not be treated as a criminal, but rather as a sick patient, which is what they are. Society will understand that people are products of their environment, and rather than condemn the person to a cold, concrete cell, which basically and statistically has been proven makes them worse, social scientists will heavily research the cultural causes and consider those conditions that need to be altered fundamentally through education. In conclusion, there are many out there who say that what we're describing here, the development of a resource-based economy, would just never happen. They would typically cite human nature and the power elite or erroneous technical opinions in their defense. This cynicism has no support in view of humanity's technical and social development throughout history. We have come from a world of extreme superstition, abject slavery, extreme racism, social prejudice, to a slowly emerging world of race equality, scientific ingenuity, and emerging values, the desire to see humanity benefit as one organism. We have gone from smoke signals to the telephone to electronic mail sent at near the speed of light. Everything that has once been considered impossible has gradually become possible. The Wright brothers were told by experts that it was impossible to fly. Years ago, if you talked about going to the moon, they called you a mooniac. To assume something is impossible in this world is merely a failure of creativity. In the words of Carl Sagan, the old appeals to racial, sexual, and religious chauvinism, to the rabid nationalist fervor, are beginning not to work. A new consciousness is developing which sees the Earth as a single organism and recognizes that an organism and world of itself is doomed. We are one planet. Thank you. And now we're going to have a conversation with the Venus Project. We're going to remove this screen.